public on Zoom or those who are here and signed up to speak, and then from committee members, many of whom submitted questions in advance. And that's all I really need to say, Dr. Shoup, other than thank you so very much for being with us this evening.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. Parking is my favorite topic, and I suggest some ideas about new parking policies that I think are well suited for the Upper West Side. Naturally, I have a PowerPoint presentation to aid me in I'd like to talk to you about parking benefit districts and how they compare to parking permit districts. A parking benefit district uses the meter revenue to pay for public investments on the metered streets. This use of the revenue can create political support among residents to charge drivers for curb parking. The meters can tell everyone where the money goes. So you can see a label on this parking meter in Old Pasadena, which was the first city to dedicate the meter revenue to the blocks that generate it. The program began in 1982, and it has turned a commercial skid row into one of the most popular destinations in Southern California. On a typical weekend, 30,000 people come to walk around and shop and dine and go to theaters. In the 5 years after parking meters were installed on the formerly free curb parking spaces, sales tax revenue, which is a measure of business activity, tripled. The key thing is to know what is done with the meter revenue. The city of Pasadena wanted to put in parking meters, but the merchants, the property owners, and the residents said, no way, it'll chase away the few customers that we have. And then the mayor of Pasadena said, well, we will offer all the meter revenue to Old Pasadena. And the people who had bitterly opposed parking meters said, why aren't they there here now? Why has it taken so long? Why didn't you tell us this, that if we put in parking meters, that we would get the money to pay for old public services? So they quickly agreed to the proposal, and they installed the meters, and they wanted the meters to run until midnight and on Sunday, simply because the meter money would come back to the Old Pasadena. Which knew it had wanted to invest more money in the neighborhood. The sidewalks were in terrible condition and the alleys were dirty. So when the meters went in, they yielded over $1 million a year, about $80,000 per block. And the legislation authorizing these districts are very simple. Here is just one paragraph, a 1 paragraph long ordinance saying that all the money will go for exclusively to purposes within the geographic boundaries of the parking benefit district. So the parking benefit districts are like parking permit districts 2.0. The residential parking permit districts were begun in 1970. In Arlington, Virginia, to protect low-density neighborhoods from parking spillover from high-density business districts or universities. But that is not what the Upper West Side is like. The Upper West Side is not like a low-density neighborhood next to a business district. Parking benefit districts do best where the curb parking is crowded, that people complain that there's never any place to park at the curb. And most residents do not own a car or park off-street. And the public services are undersupplied. If the public parking benefit district pays for public services that people in the district want and will not get unless the city charges for curb parking in the district, market parking prices begin to make political sense. Here's a districts that have already done this in the United States and out in the rest of the world. And here is the Upper West Side. Why is the parking benefit district a good place here? Well, there are 222,000 residents and only a little over 12,000 unmetered curb spaces. So that's 18 residents per curb space. If we had a parking permits at a low cost that went to people, there would be one permit for every 18 residents getting a permit, and 17 out of every 8 residents get nothing. So that is why I think that the conventional permit parking district in a low density residential neighborhood wouldn't work on the Upper West Side. Now, just consider a one block, not a tip, just one block on the Upper West Side. And the price of a round trip on public transit is $5.90. So suppose you city charge $5.90 a day. That's only 25 cents an hour for on-street parking. Well, the revenue per curb space will be over $2,000 a year per meter. So suppose you had a block with 20 curb spaces, and the revenue would be $43,000 a year. And suppose the city was already spending this $43,000 a year to keep the sidewalks clean and safe and remove graffiti every night and sweep the street every night. And like in old Pasadena, steam clean the sidewalks every 2 weeks. Few of the 360 residents would say the city should spend $43,000 a year less so that it can offer free parking for hard to find free parking for 20 cars. I don't think the residents who live on the street should pay for free parking for those 20 cars by a loss of $43,000 a year in spending for public services. I think it'd be much better if 20 drivers paid $5.90 a day to park on the streets. And of course, $5.90 a day is absurdly low for the price to pay for parking on some of the most valuable land on earth. But it shows how a low price per day in a parking meter can provide very good public services. Well, let's look at a real block. That was just an assumed block. Here is a block that I'm sure that most of you are familiar with, at least know where it is. The dark green ribbon around the block is an 8-foot wide curb lane. And this is the land where the parking benefit district would charge market prices for curb parking. There are already meters on the either end of the block on Amsterdam and Columbus, but it's free on 75th and 76th Street. So suppose on the long streets, we charge the same prices that the drivers on Amsterdam and Columbus Avenue pays, which is $4 or $5 an hour. So to begin this, the city could begin charging $5 an hour for all the free spaces on 75th and 76th, and then adjust prices up or down depending on the occupancy and the hours. When the spaces are all full, the city would nudge the price up by 50 cents an hour every month until it got to the point where 1 or 2 open spaces should be open on every block. That is the ideal occupancy rate, so that whenever anybody arrives, they can see an open space waiting for them, but it will be $5 an hour to begin with. So the prices would be different on different blocks depending on demand and different at different times of the day, be lower at midnight than at noontime, but the prices can be adjusted so that that there's always a space available for you. And several spaces could be reserved for delivery vehicles. Now, when it's very difficult for delivery vehicles, here's 75th Street, where is the delivery vehicle going to park? And they double park. Several of the spaces could be reserved for delivery vehicles and electric bicycle carriers, and for Amazon and UPS and things like that. So the curb lane will serve commerce and produce higher revenue. So on this block, there are a little over 1,000 residents and 72 unmetered parking spaces. Howard Yaruss counted these spaces for me, so they're really official, I suppose. The two nearest, so that would be, of the residents, there are 12 residents per legal unmetered parking space. And if you charge that for the rest of for the now free spaces, it would add up to more than $1 million a year, which is about $1,100 per year per resident, and to pay for added public services. Now, the area of the curb lane around this block is 9% of the area it surrounds. If you own 9% of all the land in the Upper West Side, you would be perhaps the richest person on earth. And you would understand that free parking is not the best use of all this land in the Upper West Side. So that if we had this for the Upper West Side, it would be about at least $118 million every year. Well, how would you use the money? Here's things that have done in other cities. You could give free Wi-Fi to all residents. And if we have market-priced curb parking, the revenue could provide free Wi-Fi for everybody who lives there. Or free transit passes for all the residents. A specific benefit of this is the money would actually go to the MTA, but it wouldn't be a supply side subsidy. The money wouldn't go straight to the MTA. It would go to the residents for the free transit passes. And the political support for the charging market prices would be the free transit passes for everybody who lives on the block. Or it could be free membership in a car sharing organization. And the car share, like Zipcar, they could rent several parking spaces on the block, and everybody could have a free membership in it. So it would be the relationship between cars and the residents would shift from ownership by a few to availability for many. There would be fewer private cars and more shared cars, and free public transit would improve life in most neighborhoods. Or they could pay for containerized waste bins in the curb lane and empty them frequently. I know that the city is trying this out, but it's expensive and it's been slowed down. So if we use parking meter revenue to pay for these containerized waste bins, it would get a lot of trash off the sidewalks. And you could also pay to clean the under the parked cars, so the owners who do park on the street don't need to move their car twice a week. I think using the money to pay for cleaning the subway systems would be very good. Clean and maintain the Upper West Side's 15 subway stations. Drivers who pay to park on the street will improve life for the vastly greater number of people who travel underground. And it could get the trash off the sidewalks. A quick way to judge the health of a city is to look at the condition of its sidewalks. The curb parking revenue could improve public health by paying to clean the sidewalks now covered with black polka dots and piles of trash. So the city could accelerate its plan to provide a few large waste bins and empty them frequently. New York calls this waste containerization. It's on a trial run, but I understand the cost is slowing it down. The city would lose a few curb spaces on the block, but the meter prices would keep other spaces open. It wouldn't lead to no curb spaces available. The price of parking would have to go up to reduce the demand for curb parking. But that would create more money for the parking benefit districts. They could look better than these first attempts. They look much better in Barcelona, which has been using them for decades. And this is how they were removed. Waste containerization will improve the lives of sanitation workers who now have to deal with trash bags on the sidewalks. There's so many things that the parking benefit districts can finance. It can't finance everything, but the residents would be able to say, this is our highest priority. And some people have said that the best way to talk about parking reform is not even to mention the word parking. It's to say, what would your neighborhood like to have? And find out what their highest priority is. And I hope that replanting street trees would be high up. And then say, well, we don't have the money, but here's how other cities pay for these services by charging market prices for curb parking. So I think you have to have a choice between free curb parking or better public services. You can set them up just the way we set up the conventional parking permit districts by having people petition for a parking that their block be turned into a parking benefit district. It's a block by block opt-in democratic process, the way regular permit districts do, but this one would produce money. And most residents, I think, in the Upper West Side, because there are many more people than curb parking spaces, they would probably say, I'd rather have better public services than hard to find free curb parking. An easy way to start it, I think, would be to have bids ask for them. They already have the authority to spend revenue within their boundaries. They have experience in managing the streets and sidewalks. They have a government agency that they would know what to do with the money. In the old Pasadena, there is a parking benefit district, which is the same as the business improvement district. And the business improvement district spends the money very efficiently. Well, I think that it will not privatize the curb lane. Many people think that charging money for curb pricing is privatizing it. What it does, it will show you the value of the curb lane without privatizing it. The city owns the curb lane and spends the revenue to provide public services, and it charges market prices to manage the curb lane, aiming for an occupancy rate of about 85%. This is what the Marxists would call market socialism. So there are markets without capitalism. Whether you're for or against capitalism, doesn't make any difference with this. I think that it's ideology free. There are a lot of political reasons why, regardless of your ideology, you think that I would like to have this on my block. The liberals, they want to spend more money, and there are a lot of things that are under-maintained, not just in the Upper West Side, but around the world. The Upper West Side is in great shape compared to the many densities around the world. And relies on markets. That seems a good idea. And environmentalists have a lot to gain because they reduce energy consumption and air pollution and carbon emissions. Now, in the Upper West Side, it's famous for people driving around hunting for parking. The Seinfeld shows that they often had events with how hard it was to find curb parking. And one of the events, George and Elaine were driving to meet Jerry in his apartment, and George was driving around and around the block hunting for a curb space. And Elaine said, well, why don't you park in the garage? And he said, I never pay for parking. Paying for parking is like going to a prostitute. Why should I pay when, if I apply myself, maybe I can get it for free? Well, everybody's trying to get it for free. But the problem is it creates traffic congestion. It makes the life less pleasant for bicyclists and pedestrians, but we've lived with it for decades. The new urbanists say that, well, we can live at high density without being overrun by cars. And the residents have a lot to gain because the vast majority of them do not park a car on the street. And less than half of the people in the Upper West Side own a car, and many of them, they have to park off street because there's just not enough on-street parking. And the neighborhoods will be saying, what is the greatest priority? Do we want to have healthy street trees, or do we want free Wi-Fi? And the biggest gainers would be the city council members who say they can get a lot of things done without raising any taxes. And the city council wouldn't have these endless mind-numbing sessions dealing with the curb parking where they have to pretend they're interested in parking and that they have some expertise in it. So I think we can cash in on curb parking. That it's a great opportunity disguised as an insoluble problem. It's almost like urban alchemy that we can transform a parking shortage into better public services. In fact, the bigger the problem, the better the public services. So the curb parkers will be paying guests, not freeloaders. As I understand, many people in the Upper West Side complain about the cars parked at the curb with Connecticut and New Jersey license plates. Well, this would be like Monty Python's idea to solve Britain's economic problems by taxing foreigners living abroad. Instead of just complaining about these people coming in and parking in our neighborhood, we charge them for parking in the neighborhood, and we will not pay anything. The people who don't park on the street wouldn't pay anything. So you can manage the curb lane to serve everyone in the neighborhood, not just drivers who park their cars on the street. I think that I hope I've convinced you that it's politically popular if most residents don't own a car. And it's financially successful. It's just dreams of money beyond avarice, of having so much money cascading into this neighborhood from parked cars. And certainly the environment will benefit the most. And I think it is socially just. Well, I hope that all the Upper West Siders will consider how a parking district could work on their block. Well, that's about all I know, so I better stop. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today, and I look forward to hearing your questions and comments.
Thank you, Dr. Shoup. I am going to allow our chairs, we thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to allow our chairs to entertain our questions first, I think, from the public, and then from our committee. I have a couple of questions, but as a committee member, I will wait my turn.
As will I. I just want to make note that there are a few topics that arise as much personal investment and commitment as parking in our district does. And so just a quick reminder that I'm sure I don't need to make, that all of us are going to talk to each other and of course to our esteemed presenter in the way in which we would want to have a collegial conversation about these very important and very controversial topics. So with that, do we have a list of folks signed up online to ask questions? I'm asking Jessie, I guess.
No, we don't. We do have a hand raised.
Okay, so while you're promoting the hand raise, I'll take the first person from the community. And that's this gentleman here. He beat you to it with the hand raise. It looks like with this number of folks, we won't have a problem getting to everybody for a couple of minutes to speak. I'm not going to turn on a timer, but please be concise. And I do need you to step up because this microphone is only going to be able to hear you at a certain distance.
You may not want it. You want me to?
Yeah, Dan, this is.
So this will be the hot seat for anybody who wants to speak. Come on up and then surrender the seat when you're done.
And please tell us who you are. I know who you are, but these kind of folks don't. And we generally do have a 2 minute.
About a 2 minute.
Yeah.
Let's try to aim for that. So
Good.
welcome.
Thank you. I'm Dan Zimak, Z-I-M-A-K. I live on 86th Street. I was born on the Upper West Side. I've been here for decades. I did leave for a number of years, but we're back here. My comments will be brief. The doctor who spoke was comparing us to Pasadena. New York is not Pasadena, and there are other ways to look at the situation. I suggest you look at San Francisco. San Francisco community areas, residents are allowed to pay for parking permits, and they can park anywhere other than the 2 days a month that the street cleaner comes. So that's helping the residents and helps everyone else. So I think that would be a more desirable way to look at using the parking spaces. And you say, well, charge for parking spaces for the residents. I don't know if that's really correct. I have a 2-bedroom apartment. I'm paying like $18,000 a year in taxes. I think that's a good amount of money for the city to have some responsibility to help keep the streets clean.
Great.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Right on schedule. Thank you so much.
Dan.
Dr.
Not
Shoup, what I'm gonna
Very nice.
Dr. Shoup, what I'm gonna suggest is that we hear from all these folks, and then if you have comments in summary at the end, rather than one by one, how's that?
Yes. Okay, well, I suggest that on the block at 86th Street, if you asked every member of the block to vote on whether they want to have free curb parking or a parking benefit district, most of them would say, I want a parking benefit district, because most of them don't own a car. And those who do own a car park off street. I think that if you want to make it a democratic process, you want to ask people what they want. And San Francisco, yes, does have parking, conventional parking permit district, and they say it's a nightmare, many of them, because they have more permits than there are spaces. And I just wonder how many permits could be given on the 86th Street if the space, the number of permits were limited to the number of curb spaces. And how would you distribute those permits among the many people who would love to have a car if they could park cheaply on the street? And San Francisco isn't a big city, it's bigger than Pasadena, but Houston has them. That's one of the 4th biggest city in the country. And they have many of them. It spreads from as soon as one area gets it, other areas want it. And I'd say that I've certainly seen statements like this, but in many public meetings, the people who own a car capture the meetings because they are the ones who want to go to, who else would go to a meeting about parking unless you had a car? And it really excludes the vast majority of people who do not have, well, I think I have the numbers, something about 70% of the Upper West Side residents do not own a car. And I suppose they would rather have clean subway stations and clean streets and containerized ways than hard to find cheap curb parking that leads to a lot of cruising and air pollution.
Thank you, Doctor. I do think we want to hear from everybody first, and then we'll come back to you on that, because that way I think we can move this all along. But thank you for testifying. I'm going to go to one on screen, and then we'll come back to the room. There's a man named Michael. Is that correct? I can't really read your name.
Zinder.
Michael Zinder. Is that you, sir?
That is me. Thank you. So just briefly, a couple things. So first, thank you again to the professor for his remarks. There's a lot of thoughtfulness that went into them. I would just say a couple of things. Number one, I do think we're talking about two issues here. One is allocation of space, and another is revenue raising. And they have some intersections, but they are kind of two separate things. Secondly, I would say in general, the theme of my remarks will be careful what you wish for, because it may not turn out the way you want it to. So I've lived on the Upper West Side for 50 years. I was president of my co-op, also happens to be on 86th Street. For 15 years. At that time, actually, I was invited to join CB7 by the then head of it. Had some other things going on then, so I couldn't do it. I wanted to be there tonight, except my wife is not feeling well, so I have to stay home tonight. But I really appreciate this opportunity. Just briefly, so if the Upper West Side was a village with its own separate governance, taxing authority, and spending authority, I would be very, very supportive of what the professor has suggested. It is my considered view, and I think if most of you think about it, I think you would agree, that whatever revenue raising we do in our neighborhood is not necessarily going to stay in our neighborhood. The city looks particularly at the Upper West Side, the Upper East Side as revenue raising devices for financing the government. Easy enough to see from all the meter reader cops that walk around both of our neighborhoods, anxious to give out tickets, but very infrequently do you ever see policemen patrolling as they did 25 years ago, just to look out for crime and whatnot. So they're anxious to tax us in various ways, including through parking tickets and violations, et cetera. But I don't see that money coming back to us at all, especially at a time of fiscal austerity, with the migrant situation, with huge deficits being run. I mean, look at Central Park. I was very glad to see the Central Park Conservancy take a strong interest there, and I'm a big supporter of it, in fact. But when you think about it, it's really sort of crazy that the nicest, largest park in New York City is completely subsidized by private donations. The city has decreased its contribution to that substantially year by year. So I do think on the Upper West Side, if we do something that raises a lot of money, we're not going to see the public benefits, sir. We're not going to see our subways clean. We're not going to see our streets clean. That'll go into the general pot of the overall city, and the overall city needs money, and they're just going to take all that money. So I am very much against that idea personally. What I would be in favor of, which is the prior speaker I think was starting to get to, and what I've talked with some of folks who were there before about this, is perhaps a permit system where the permit cost would be reasonable, not something like, $50 a day or $10 a day or something, but, maybe more in the nature of $50 a month or $25 a month. So that people would have to pay for the privilege of parking. But part of what I would want to do, and I think people should think long and hard about this, is to exclude those very people the professor was talking about who drive around with Connecticut plates and with New Jersey plates, drive around our neighborhood causing pollution. I agree with him 100% on that, causing disruption to bicyclists and walkers, and who have no business, frankly, parking on our block when they have no connection to our Upper West Side at all. And with congestion pricing coming, and with the $15 they'd have to pay by going further down in the district, it is going to be so much worse with these people coming. But if they simply couldn't park here, if they didn't have a permit, then I think that would be a great way of reducing all of that and keeping them out of our neighborhood, which we don't want. And we can have, the city, I think, fairly can charge some appropriate nominal fee for it. We just don't want it to be seen as a revenue raising device whereby they try to just suck the Upper West Side out of more. And to the professor's point about, and I take the point that there will be a lot more people perhaps interested in spots than there would be available spots. Well, I agree that would be the case. I don't think it's nearly as drastic as he's painted. First of all, as he also admitted, a lot of people don't have a car and wouldn't want a car for a variety of reasons. I didn't have a car until 20 years ago. I have two adults.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up. I'm going to ask you to wrap up, please.
I have two adult sons in the city. Neither of them have cars. I think a lot of people would not have cars. So I think it would be competitive, but I think there could be an allocation system that's fair that could be worked out. And that's what I would favor.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. Let's hear from somebody in the room. Yeah, you were next, and we'll get to you. No worries. Okay. Hi, give us your name, please, and then tell us what you think.
My name is Sophia. I'm a resident of the Upper West Side. Thank you, Professor Shoup. I really respect your research. I quoted you in my master's thesis and love your work. So it's great that you guys invited Professor Shoup. I was just wondering if you could provide more examples than Pasadena of where the parking benefit district worked, where it was successful, and then as you can see, there's a lot of pushback against the program here. And with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could talk about the buy-in process of getting people on board to adopt this program. Thank you.
So let's hold that until the end when the professor gives his concluding remarks. But if you'd make a note that for that question as well. Do we have another person online? Rachel Hodges. Andrew is always ahead of me on these things. Great. Rachel Hodges, you're up, please. And please try to keep us to a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Absolutely. I would echo the previous person's sentiments that I am a big fan of yours, Professor Shoup. I've been following your work for a long time, and so it's been absolutely incredible to hear you present, especially about the neighborhood that I live in and care about so much. I do have a question for you, but I will couch it with my remarks for CB7, which is first of all, thank you so much for inviting Professor Shoup to give this presentation. I think it's been really informative and just very cool to see the example set in our neighborhood of all of the revenues that could be raised if parking benefit districts were implemented for our neighborhood and also for the Upper East Side, with the onset of the Central Business Tolling District coming into play soon. So I very much support this. Looking forward to hearing more about parking benefit district for our neighborhood in the future. And my question for Professor Shoup is, so I'm looking at a map right now of NYC, and I know you can't see it, but there are a couple of different business improvement districts in our, what we consider to be the CB7 Upper West Side. And they are non-contiguous and don't cover the entire neighborhood. And so I'm curious to hear how you would recommend we go about implementing a parking benefit district, thinking about how you spoke of BIDs are quasi-governmental. They have the experience with like collecting and distributing funds and spending those funds and managing them, and how that partnership would look between a BID and an agency like the MTA that would presumably be coordinating with them, especially in light of not all of our neighborhood is covered by a BID or so. Like, would there need to be more BIDs? Like, how do you think that could work, and how could we brainstorm some solutions? I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll go to somebody in the room, please. Why don't we go back to the back row? We'll just keep coming around. While we're doing that, Jessie, is there anybody else online that we should be thinking about or calling on?
Yes, I see two hands up, Thomas and Nick. I'm gonna promote them now.
Very good. And meanwhile, go ahead, sir.
Sure. My name is Mark Stopov. I moved here 4 years ago from Rockland County. I commuted every day into the city for 45 years. Car is a necessity for my job, my lifestyle, visiting my daughters, going away on the weekends. Public transportation cannot possibly accommodate me. But I look at this in a different approach. I think that as car owners, we're being punished. And actually, we do more to support this city than non-car owners. Let me enumerate. I pay New York City income tax well above $15,000 a year. I pay $15,000 plus a year in real estate taxes in my building. I bought a car last year. I paid $3,300 in sales tax. I paid registration fee, an inspection fee, my driver's license. I'm paying parking meters anywhere from $1 an hour to $5 an hour. When I have to park in a garage, I do. I'm paying an 18% tax. When I get fuel, I'm paying a very large gasoline tax. When I replace a tire, I pay a tire disposal fee. And of course, living in the city, feeding meters or alternate parking, we all get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tickets a year at $65 to $115 a piece. Okay, I'm paying tolls on bridges, tunnels, throughway. My Easy Pass bill averages $150 a month. How many people living in this city earn their income?
That's 2 minutes, sir. Can you?
Yes. My point is that we pay more than our fair share, and there's a limit. How much money I earn? Can I spend more to live here comfortably and reasonably, not to get hit with more additional fees? It's really an outrage. And just to end this, permits, the Upper West Side, when you go out in the morning, look at all of the vans, the trucks, the private cars. Every single building has 3, 4, 5 different contractors working. They park. Thank goodness they leave. And when I come home from work, if I see a plumber's truck, and it's 4:30, I sit there, and at 5 o'clock, he pulls out and I have my parking spot. To lose more parking spaces or to pay more, it's terribly unfair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir, very much.
Very good. Let's go to somebody online. And then we'll go to the room again. Jessie, could you introduce the next person?
Thomas
next-
Cryer.
Thomas?
I believe it's Thomas Knierim. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening. I former member of Community Board 6 a number of years back, until very recently former resident of District 7. So I hope you'll listen to me for a few minutes. Currently a resident of District 10 in Central Harlem. I'll try and be brief. First of all, thank you, Dr. Shoup. I've been following your work since graduate days at Hunter's Urban Affairs and Planning Program. Very much appreciate the groundbreaking research that you've done. Also a veteran myself of business improvement districts in Union Square in particular early in my career. Just want to say that I actually not only support what Dr. Shoup is proposing and what the community board is considering, but having moved back to the city and no longer requiring a car for work or for moving my kids around to schools, I've actually given up all of my cars and couldn't be happier. I use rental cars, I use zip cars, I walk cabs, subways, buses, live right near the Metro North in 125th Street, and I'm absolutely thrilled to no longer be handicapped by having, apologies for my use of that word, no longer be having to deal with a car and alternate side of the street parking. I think back to the old, for those of you who are the same vintage, the Odd Couple episode where Felix and Oscar win the car and have to deal with the alternate side rules all the way back then. The only question really I would have for Dr. Shoup is, I thought I heard you say earlier in your presentation that you were suggesting that perhaps that this could be implemented on a block by block basis. But I would fear that if the city were to ever do that, I would think that that would be almost more chaotic than the situation is now, that it would be better to do test perhaps in an entire community board. I think the idea of using a business improvement district format is intriguing. Or perhaps you would have to map, say, a parking district overlaid on one of the other city service delivery districts or business improvement districts. But very much appreciate what you're doing there at CB7 and believe that it is the only way. I was just looking this up before I was speaking and noticed that it was only 1954, apparently, that the city allowed overnight parking. So this is not something that's new, but it's also not something that's old. Thank you very much for taking my time, for taking me
So
be able to speak.
Seinfeld, we've got the Odd Couple. When we're going to get to Car 54, where are you? So let's go to the next person speaker, please. And meanwhile, let's call up the next online speaker as well.
That's Nick.
That's Nick. Okay, thank you.
Which way do you want me to speak?
Just no, right to this.
Yeah, speaking to our friend the owl here is the best thing. Thank you.
Hi,
And please go through your name.
my name is Maxine DeSeta. I'm representative of the West Side for parking. There's a myth out here that we can't find parking. Well, that's true, because we have city bikes cluttering our streets. We have car shares, 2 spaces they pay $475 for 2 spaces. We also have a problem. Our taxes are huge. Mine is $13,000 for 2 bedrooms. We have a block association on the next block that has $45,000 in their kitty. So it's not a lot of money for the block itself. The other thing is, yes, it's true, there is only 25% of us that have cars, but there's also only 18% of people on the Upper West Side who have children under 18, which tells you something. Middle class families with kids cannot afford to live here. Number one, we're here because of Mitchell Lama buildings that had garage space. My family still lives on 94th Street, and the open street program has turned that into a slum. It has turned 103rd Street into a slum. And contrary to what's been told here about people with cars not being able, being overly presenting, Upper West Side parking has never been able to present. We have asked again and again for time, and it has never happened. Only advocates for bicycle lanes or Dr. Shoup, I don't mean to say anything against your presentation, but it is only presentations that say, we don't want you to have a private car. And the problem with residential permits is when my family comes in, or I have to take my mother who had to live with me with Alzheimer's across town to take her to the center, I needed my car. I had children. Most people in our community no longer have families. They have left. The middle class is leaving, and that is due to the fact that we also have buildings now being built without garage spaces. 103rd Street just had a huge building, no garage space, and most of the people on the community boards come from a real estate, hospitality, or represent lobbyists. They may not get paid.
Actually, we're not gonna start talking about characterizing my colleagues on this board.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, please wrap.
Please do that.
I taught for 30 years as a teacher. I bicycled to work every day for 30 years. My whole family has bicycles. Bicycles are wonderful. 1% of the people who use them in the city is for work. We bicycled in the park, most people. I bicycled in the street. We need light rail to come in and out of this. That's where the money should be spent. We have no elevators for our subways, very few, and only 1% of our buses even have shelters. I have to stand in the rain and the snow. That should be your priority.
Okay, we're moving afield though from the conversation.
I'm sorry. Okay. Yes.
Is that after spending today with my 91-year-old mother
Yes.
and having dealt with my son all week, who is 19 and lives with me and has surgery.
Yes.
And we use the car to get him back and forth to the hospital. So I understand my private car. I then circled the block tonight 6 times with my daughter and then left her parking so I could get to this meeting. So I see you, I hear you. I arranged for Dr. Shoup, and I would love to speak with you after this.
Okay.
To talk more about what you've been saying.
Thank you both.
And by the way,
Okay.
150 of 472 stations are accessible.
And
growing.
Okay. Let's not go back and forth here.
Maxine, I'd like to exchange information.
Okay. We'll do that. Thank you. But let's keep our meeting going because we've got Dr. Shoup for only so much time. When do we lose Dr. Shoup?
When do we lose Dr. Shoup? Dr. Shoup, do you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Did we lost?
Okay.
When do you have to go teach your next class, Dr. Shoup?
Do you want me to make a summary before I go?
To know what time we will lose
Got
you,
a
because
few
we
more
do
people.
want to have you answer questions, but we have about 2 more people who have questions before we get to summer.
Okay,
Will you
well,
stay with us?
well, unless some students come to see me, these are my office hours. No, I'm happy to hear. I'm really impressed by the involvement of the committee. I think I've gone to a lot of meetings about parking, and this is like many of them, but I think it's unique in the sense that it's in the Upper West Side, and I'd be happy to hear a couple more people, and then I'd respond to.
Great. Thank you so
Doctor.
much.
So let's
So
do that.
Nick on Zoom, and then we've got Peg and user.
I'm trying.
Hi,
Nick
yeah.
on Zoom and
I just sort of a comment that, are you able to hear me?
I'm trying to.
Yeah, go right
Yes,
ahead.
2 minutes next.
Okay, so my comment is just that I live on 72nd. There are something like 3,000 or 4,000 people live on my block alone. And there's maybe like a couple of dozen parking spots. And I see, there are cars you walk by when there's leaves falling in the fall and stuff that they've got leaves on their windshield for, sometimes like days. These cars don't move. I walk up and down the block every day. So there were a few comments thrown out about fairness, the fairness of, being a driver is hard. Some people need their cars to get around. I'm sure it's quite expensive. I don't own a car. I can only imagine how expensive and difficult it is, but not a lot is free in this city. Space is really at a premium. We all know that. And I think that it just strikes me that, there are these spaces on the street, tens of them, and there's no cost associated with consuming this space in the public street, for days, just as sort of vehicle storage. And many thousands of people live on my block, a few dozens of them. All of the thousands of us pay taxes, just like the car owners do. We all pay fees. There are expenses that we all pay. We all get sick of the expenses that we have. But it strikes me that maybe there'd be a more or sensible way to use some of this space so that instead of benefiting tens of us, it had more benefit for the many thousands of us that live on the block. Because it's maybe 1% of people who live on my block are able to consume that free street parking. And that always strikes me as sort of an injustice. Thank you for your time. Thank you all for participating, and for the professor as well.
Thanks so much. We're gonna just take the two folks here in the room that are left, and then we're gonna hear from Dr. Shoup. So Tag, why don't you come on up?
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Actually, give me 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to interject what Nicole Painter, who is the, president, executive director of the Columbus, one of our three bids, writes in the Q&A, bids can manage funds for outside of their own district if they are not assessment funds from properties within the bid boundaries. So I guess she's making the point you can't cross-pollinate. So thank you, Nicole. I wanted to make sure we got that in before time expired. Tag, please go right ahead.
Thanks. I wanted to say a couple of things. One is that in all the talk about parking and in coming to meetings for a number of years, there's never ever been a study done by DOT or looked into by the board about how do Upper West Siders use their cars. They use them for a lot of different reasons. Almost no one uses them to drive into Midtown. They'll use them to reverse commute to difficult to get to jobs, things like that, to take care of family members, emergencies, vacations. Getting out of New York is an essential part of being in New York. Also, one space doesn't necessarily represent one person. It could be a whole household. The other thing I want to say is I want to thank Dr. Shoup for making the case for residential parking, because that's what we need. Not benefit parking, residential parking. And why? Residential parking fits into what the mission of this community board has been regarding parking and cars since I've known about this. And that is safety. If you do benefit parking, what you're doing is you're inviting people to continue to use their cars to come into our neighborhood to do whatever they need, whether it's commute in here to work, whether it's to come to buy goods or services or whatever, or whether it's to escape congestion pricing. So by having benefit parking, we have free Wi-Fi already on the kiosk if you really need it. But if you want to have this benefit parking, you're inviting people into our neighborhood, causing more traffic, causing more danger, etc. And the residents who drive here are respectful of each other because we're neighbors. And so that's where this deviates from what the mission of this board has been. And the one other thing I'd like to say is that I park my car in a garage. This is like a super elitist, privileged type of execution, because you're taking people who cannot afford to pay these fees and banning them from being able to use their vehicles. There are nurses, there are handymen, there are all kinds of people that still live in our neighborhood that are not rich car owners, that depend upon their cars for their livelihood. Musicians, there's still a few of those that are hanging on here by our fingernails. So I think that these are the kind of things that you guys got to look at. And I would have wanted to say briefly regarding the woman here, it would be great if you guys could have a more balanced approach to how the opinions are voiced, because it seems like it's always like you got 2 minutes. So all of us that kind of don't agree with a lot of the TA policies have to make our case in 2 minutes. We can't come and put up a PowerPoint and show you, hey, look, this is where this program failed. Hey, this is what happened on Central Park West. We got another death. This didn't work. That, and show where some of the mistakes have been made, as well as where some of the great things are.
But Tag, you're over your 2 minutes.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, sir, come on up, and then I'm gonna contradict myself because I see Monica Blum from the Lincoln Square bid is also with us, and so we're privileged to have you with us, and so we'll hear from you, and then we'll turn to Dr. Shoup. Sir, give us your name, please.
Thank you. My name is Alan Morningstar. I'm a resident of the Upper West Side, and I just wanted to say thank you to the professor for sharing your time with us. You're heavily credentialed in this topic, and you've written hundreds of pages in that book that's over there. You've clearly put a lot of deep thought into this topic, and I thank you for summarizing how that applies to us today. I think the externalities of driving are something that is well quantified. It's something that's understood and supported by the public, as evidenced by overwhelming public support for congestion pricing. I think that something that hasn't been mentioned by anyone yet is the goal of congestion pricing is to solve that last mile problem for working families who have difficulty getting from the last connection of transit to their ultimate destination. I have a strong belief in the free market. I think that, you can have a private car, you're just going to have to pay for it. The public is not going to subsidize that space any longer. We've already talked about how valuable space is in New York City. And I think in terms of international cities, parking here for residents is actually one of the cheapest places in the world. So I just wanted to share those thoughts, and thanks again, Professor, for your presentation today.
Thank you, Mr. Morningstar. We're going to go to Monica Blum.
Hi, I wasn't planning on speaking,
Go
but
ahead, fine.
thank you. I wasn't really planning on saying anything, but I did hear Dr. Shoup a number of years ago when my colleague Barbara Adler, I think, invited him to talk about bids and resident parking. And I heard earlier tonight someone on the board talked about there are 3 bids and maybe the bids could do this. I'm a fan of resident parking. However, and my personal experience is that I go to Boston a great deal because I have 2 little grandchildren there, and we contend with residential parking. We use those visitor spots or parking meters, but that is run by the city of Boston. And I don't think our organization has the capacity or the interest in taking on a residential parking program, because the money is collected now by DOT, not the MTA. It's collected by the city. So I think that it's a great idea. I'm not sure it'll help with congestion pricing. I think the demands on all our parking spaces are incredible. Now the city has just released rules on mobility parking for deliveries. And so it really has to be a comprehensive program. I think it's a good idea, but I don't think it will relieve the problems that I know I read about everybody up on 79th Street and our concerns, because we're right on the boundary at 60 and 61st Street. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think it really should be run by the city. And it has to be a comprehensive program, neighborhood by neighborhood. And as I said, I haven't talked to my board about this, but I suspect that we would not be able to take it on. It's not like a dedicated assessment, which we do handle. So anyhow, I'm fascinated by it because I see how it works. And I just have to say, in Boston, there are hardly any spaces for non-residents. There are like 2 or 3 spots where we can leave our car, and then it's only limited times. So, it's not a simple thing, with all due respect, Professor Shoup. I know you've done a lot of work on this, but I don't know. And in the other thing I will say, in Boston, each neighborhood, so for example, Beacon Hill has its resident parking, and then you go 1 block further, I don't know what direction, and all of a sudden you're in Back Bay, and again it says resident parking, and then visitors. So it's done by neighborhood by the government of Boston, which is much smaller. So thank you. I'm fascinated by this. I think it's it's worth conversation.
Thanks, Monica.
Thanks, Monica. And we know that there are some more hands raised, but we're going to have to go. We want to make sure that we hear from Dr. Shoup on the collective input that we've just been receiving for the last half hour. We want to make sure we don't lose Dr. Shoup before that. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Shoup. Please give us any of your thoughts and reactions to the various testimony that you've heard from all the folks that we've heard from so far. And then we'll continue the conversation after that. Thank you so much. And please go ahead, Dr. Shoup.
Well, you've given me a lot to think about. I think everybody wants to park free, including me. But that doesn't mean we should turn free parking into a principle of how we run cities. That I think one of the themes that ran through the comments was in relation to business improvement districts. And I can remember when business improvement districts started, that people thought it wouldn't work. It was extra taxes. When I was a graduate student, I worked on 44th Street and would have lunch in Bryant Park, on the edge of Bryant Park. And it was then called Needle Park. And people thought, we thought, well, I ought to have a business improvement district. This was extra taxes. But now everybody wants to go to Bryant Park. That it turned into a miracle. And I think that it's comparable to a parking benefit district, that it's a small thing. It can be done on a pilot program. I don't see how any people on the transportation board could say we shouldn't try it on one block and see how it works. If you get a block where more than half of the residents say, we would like to have this, it's very easy to do. They already have parking meters that could be extended, like on 75th and 76th Street. The city has a lot of experience in metering parking, and I can understand that people say that we already pay high taxes, that we shouldn't pay anything more. But of course, paying for parking is not a tax; it's a user charge. We pay for electricity and we pay for water. Just think how awful New York would be if we didn't pay for electricity and water on the grounds that it was too expensive for low-income people. There's a burden on people. So I think that in terms of how other cities have done it, say like Houston, which is a very big city, the bigger the city, the more you need parking permit districts and parking benefit districts and business improvement districts. That the benefits have to be localized for people to want to pay for anything new. And I think that, say in Houston, there's 4 or 5 cities, parts of the city that have parking benefit districts. That maybe where, say, Pasadena is too small, but the Upper West Side is just 220,000 people. That's like a very small city. And I think that they say that, oh, the city will take the money. That's like saying that we shouldn't have business improvement districts because the city will take all the money. That I think the city will very much benefit from having parking benefit districts because they would get all of the revenue from the tickets. That if we now have metered spaces on blocks, that the city gets all of the revenue from the violations of the meters, and the residents, and you completely left out the businesses here. Don't you think that you have a responsibility to provide available parking for restaurants, stores, and businesses? It isn't just all for residents who own a car. There are a lot of other things happening in the Upper West Side other than people who own a car and want to park on the street. I think that's why we have meters. Or would you rather not have them on Amsterdam and Columbus Avenue? That's taking it away from residents and giving it to people who are willing to pay. So I think the idea of the analogy to business improvement districts is important. Some of you, I can see you're old enough to remember what New York was like before business improvement districts. And it wasn't nearly as good as it is now. And I think that if you look back on it, 20 years from now, if they'll say, if we had parking benefit districts, it was paying to clean the subway stations and buy transit passes for everybody, that they would think, well, yes, that wasn't a bad idea. So I think that I appreciate your spending so much time on this, and I'd be happy to follow up with any particular question. I did answer some of these questions, and I hope you'll send around the printed answers that I have. And I think, finally, I would say that in a small group like this, people who don't want to pay for parking can easily take over the meeting. They do not represent the vast majority of people who don't own a car. And they don't come to meetings like this. But I'm glad you allowed me to come. Thank you very much.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Here's how I think we should use the rest of our time together. Obviously, this is not a subject that we're going to close off in one meeting by a long shot. There's lots more ground to cover here and so forth. So we haven't gone around the table online or in the room, and I'm going to invite us to do that in two phases. The first is questions of fact, and I mean questions of fact, not statements that have a question mark at the end. So if there's anything about Dr. Shoup's presentation, if Dr. Shoup is still with us, that you want to ask a question about, now's about the only time I can think we can do that. And I see Jay's hand is up. Is it a question or a comment, Jay? And
Jay, you're muted.
Easier when you're not muted.
Sorry. I said I do have a question, and I also had some comment, so you decide how you want to do it.
So anybody else in the room have a question of fact? Is there something about the presentation and proposal that requires a clarification? That's where I'm going right now. So I've got Beverly and I've got Jay. Jay has his hand up first, and then Beverly. Jay, go ahead with your question of fact, if Dr. Shoup is with us.
Yeah, well,
I don't think do we lose Dr. Shoup?
Yeah, I don't see that.
he's still.
Oh, well, there goes my brilliant idea.
Well, if he's gone,
Okay.
then obviously a question.
Then we'll just go around the room.
Becomes moot. So.
Yep. So go ahead. So let's all give ourselves a couple of minutes for comments. We'll start with Jay because we're there.
May I say something about questions?
Okay, go right ahead.
I do think, Jay, if you want to submit a question, we can get it to Dr. Shoup and he will answer it for you in writing.
Yeah, I think he said that he would.
Which is remarkable considering how much work he's already done for us. So again,
Yeah,
thank you, Dr. Shoup.
I appreciate the offer, but I just rather.
Okay, well, we have to decide right now. So let's have quick comments because we're going to have to come back to this topic a number of times. We started this conversation, or at least the forethought of this meeting was about residential permit parking, and we kind of morphed into this very well-researched but very different presentation and so forth. So obviously we're going to have at some point we'll talk some more about the alternatives and so forth. And anyway, so I want to go last or next to last. I think Jami deserves the last word. So let's kind of go around the room. We'll start with Jay, and then we'll go around the briefly, please, because we're going to spend more time on this at other meetings.
Yeah, quick comments. Number one, and I think somebody already said this.
I just turned off my camera and
You're Dr. Shoup. Oh, but he's still there.
Cool. All right, Dr. Shoup. So Jay, your question for Dr. Shoup. You're up.
Oh, okay.
Who wanted to ask a question?
It was one of our board members, Dr. Shoup.
Well,
Jay
maybe
Adolf is behind as well, so you can't see him in the room.
I think it would be sort of clumsy if I re-entered them to the.
You're doing great. Don't worry. We're grateful for it.
Well, it was so typical of public meetings. They get
okay. Shoup?
I don't think he.
Can somebody
topic, and they don't represent the general public.
I think so too.
He realizes that he's.
Okay,
Now I'm
Okay,
totally
well, that was-
confused.
okay, so there was an offline conversation that ended up online. So I've now muted Dr. Shoup.
We had a
because-
hot.
Yeah, that's right. We have the red button from the West Wing here. Okay, so Jay, back to your comment. Let's keep them all moving and you're up. Go ahead.
So are we not doing questions then?
We're not doing questions because I don't think the attention of Dr. Shoup
Okay,
any
fine.
longer. Okay.
Okay. At the end of Dr. Shoup's second round, when he was responding to the comments, he mentioned something, and I think he said favorably that he referred to these parking charges, be it parking benefit or residential parking permits, as user charges. And what I would have asked him, had I had the opportunity, is on a philosophical basis, I tend to agree with user charges. Why wouldn't that apply to all municipal charges that are peculiar to a particular population? For example, if you can argue that the percentage of car owners should be paying fees for this free, so-called free parking, which is generally used in a pejorative sense, why not charge a nominal fee of $5 a day for public school? Why not charge an admission fee to parks? Why not charge cyclists a fee to have a dedicated transportation lane? I know that these are rhetorical questions, but I would have liked to hear the doctor expound on his belief in user charges as they might apply to other municipal uses.
Okay, Jay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All righty. I don't know if Dr. Shoup, if you heard the question that was embedded in that comment, and if you have care to respond. Otherwise, we'll just keep going.
Well, I was just talking to a student for a minute, but I heard the last speaker, which is an interesting question. And I think we do have user charges for things like electricity and water. That's much more similar to parking, which is in short supply. It's very different from a park that is not crowded. There's no reason why I shouldn't walk into Bryant Park, because I'm not preventing anybody else from walking into Bryant Park. But if I park in a parking space, somebody else can't use it. It's a very competitive thing that if I get it, you don't. And I think it's very reasonable to charge for something like that as for electricity or water. And I think that we wouldn't want to extend the way that we handle parking to many other things. I mean, would you want to make public housing free, for example? That would seem, if you were living in a free public housing unit, you think it would be a great idea. But we know it would be nice, but it wouldn't work. But on the other hand, cities are charging for parking, and it works just fine. And the idea that it can't work because the city would take the money, it wouldn't leave any of the money in the neighborhood. Well, that's the opposite of what I'm saying. If the city takes the money, there wouldn't be any local demand for charges for curb parking. That I think it is a piece of land that is, should serve the whole, if we talk about a block like the one that I showed in my graph, it should benefit everybody who lives in the block, not just the few people who own a car. And I think also that it neglects the interest of the merchants, the hotels, anybody. There are a lot of non-residential uses for curb spaces. I think that the Upper West Side would be more prosperous if there were open parking spaces available, like a Hollywood movie of The Good Life in Manhattan. Whenever you arrived at your destination, there's a parking space waiting for you. And that's quite possible.
All right, Doctor, thank you so much for that. I think what we're going to do is keep coming around the room for very quick comments from my colleagues around the room. And well, no, I don't really want to tax the doctor any further. So if the doctor can stay and the question gets answered, that's great. But let's have quick comments from our folks around the room. Use the time as you will, but let's keep our ball rolling, okay?
You can start, I can go. I came in late, so if you want to.
Well,
go
last in, first out. Is that?
Well, I don't know if I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
One of the first.
There you go.
Well, I have a comment and a proposal. To me, this, it just makes intuitive sense what Dr. Shoup is talking about. He makes a very compelling case. You don't have to read this book. His article was amazing. One thing he didn't mention that he mentioned in his article was that a few years ago, there was a study done at the Upper West Side, 15 blocks of Columbus Avenue in the 70s, I think maybe low 80s. And they studied how far cars cruised for parking. And the annual total, does anybody know what the annual total was?
I don't want to.
330.
It was 365,000 miles, which is,
Wow.
I think, more than here to the moon.
How many vehicles is that, Ken, approximately?
I don't know, I'd have to look, but it's
That's a lot.
probably a lot of the same vehicles, might have been two. But you know, these parking benefit districts, you hear Dr. Shoup tell it, and apparently it has borne fruit and been true in places like Houston. This would be totally eliminated. And so people would have a parking space, that's the benefit for the driver. The city would get revenue, that's the benefit for the rest of us. And the climate would benefit, and there wouldn't be all this wasted fuel. So I want to propose that I want to propose a resolution.
We're not
that
doing
we have a, not tonight, not that we vote on tonight, but we put it on a future agenda, hopefully soon, like next month. And maybe, as Dr. Shoup says, call for a pilot on a few blocks, but.
Well, let's put a pin in and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. So Howard, anything?
Oh, sure. I agree with Dr. Shoup. I'd love to park for free as well, but there's a cost. There's a high cost, in fact, of free parking. And there was a Daily News op-ed a few years ago that I recall where it said the one cost of free parking is that we can have totally free subway and buses if we charge for parking in New York City. So people see the free parking, but they don't see what you can have for it. And again, that article, which was written by me, by the way, made the point that if you charge $6 a day for on-street parking, subways are totally free, buses are totally free. So I think if people, this is the problem with the parking benefit districts, people don't see the benefit. Same thing with the congestion pricing. We're told the MTA is going to get money for capital projects down the road, but they don't see it today. All they see today is the fee. And so people need to see what they can get for it. And that's why I think this is a great proposal. And if we're coupled with specifically what the community is going to get, I do think there'd be a lot of support for it.
Okay, thanks. Jami, we're going to skip you because we're going to give you the last word. So Elizabeth?
Thanks to Dr. Shoup, if you're still on, and thanks, Jami, for organizing this. Whenever we have these parking conversations at the board, and I've been on this board for 13 years now, we always talk about sort of we talk about residential parking, right? Resident. This board is supposed to serve people who live, work, and play in our neighborhood, everything. It's not just the people who live here. And I have never seen a lease or somebody who owns an apartment that entitles you to a parking spot. I am pro the rights of people who want to park their cars. I think they should have a right to park their cars wherever they can, but I don't think they should have priority necessarily over anyone else. I think that our neighborhood, people come and park in the city, and they come to go to Lincoln Center, they come to go to use our cultural institutions and go to our restaurants. If you're gonna have it, I think I support the idea of charging people more for it, because I think by and large, a lot of people in this neighborhood, if they want to have a car, it's not something that's going to come for free for them. It's not something they're entitled to, and they should pay for it. That's it.
Thanks. Andrew, you want to jump in?
I will pass for now.
All right, Beverly.
At one point in the presentation, Dr. Shoup talked about how each block might have a different cost associated with reaching the balance between demand and supply. I just, my city work just went kind of crazy at that point, because that would be that would be so amazingly difficult to administer, and for the city to collect different rates. I think you have to think of this in terms of a consistent model of charging, if we were to ever support such a thing, across a large, broad district. You know, I understand the pure economic theory behind what he was saying, but you have to have something that can be administered. I also think there is a lot of precedent for the city to collect streams of revenue that get lockboxed for a specific use. I'm not worried that in some sense there would be leakage, you want to put it that way, to non-eligible expenditures if in fact this were tied up in a legal system. I also see lots of difficulty around how you would actually get a neighborhood or a particular area of the West Side to actually vote on whether or not they wish to take part in this, because I think that buy-in vote is a key part of making this a legitimate program. That's all.
Thanks, Beverly. Doug.
Well, lots to think about, and lots. One of the things that, you know, I like to understand better. I hear people talk about the number of people that own cars on the Upper West Side, somewhere 25% in that range. But the question I really want to know is how many people benefit from car parking, whether or not they own a car. So if they have a family member that is going to visit them, or a home health aide, or a nurse, or a plumber, or a doctor, or whatever. So I don't think we've ever really gotten that data, is how many people benefit from cars, whether or not they own them. And I just want to say, we were talking a lot about bids, and I just want to remind people that bids within the district charge a tax, and the landlords pay a tax. So we're talking about where revenue comes from. There are already bid taxes within bids. Just responding to something that Beverly just said, I have a feeling that in the future or in the present, artificial intelligence is probably going to come in terms of, you know, if we actually do have a program where, for lack of a better term, surge pricing or varied pricing depending on traffic. I mean, we have Waze, right? The apps, and even the traffic signals are adjusted in New York with computer systems. And I have a feeling that there's a way to do it. I don't know how, but lots packed in here and lots to meditate on.
Thanks. Carey.
First, just to thank Jami for setting this up. It's been an excellent conversation so far, and to thank Dr. Shoup for his time and his comments, and also for his willingness to respond to the many substantive written questions that I know we circulated as well, which I think will help formulate next steps. In my head and listening to the conversation, it really feels like the proposal is primarily geared at solving democratic buy-in and generating community support for otherwise finding a way to more readily take advantage of the potential of the curbside. But it feels like the more straightforward thing to do would just be put meters places, and that would generate funds on a citywide level. And in my head, I was thinking through concerns similar to the ones that Beverly was raising as to how would you administer it, how would you distribute funds on a neighborhood-wide basis. And so I was thinking it would probably be helpful in determining next step for us to get a better understanding from DOT, both as to how they locate meters, how they've already chosen to do that, how that's been informed in our neighborhood, and to also understand how they've been considering similar proposals in establishing the pilots that are already existing in the neighborhood, like smart curb. Have they considered doing any pilots related to probably not residential permitting, but whether or not they've looked at considering anything like expanded metering or doing A/B testing like that in the neighborhood.
Thanks. We're gonna go Ira and
was gonna
then
pass.
Alex on
I was
on
gonna
Zoom.
pass until you kindly made me think of something. You can charge different rates for different hours. So if you're somebody who's coming in for work and you don't want to pay $30 for the garage, we'll just charge you $25 for the street. But the person who goes out to teach over the bridge or something and parks overnight gets a lower rate. And then it jumps again during the day. And you can do that. I don't know if the software exists today. It might exist tomorrow. And most people have easy pass transponders at this point.
Great. Alex, do you want to take a shot?
No, no question. Just look forward to discussing future what's it called? Proposals.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Let me just.
Yeah,
say one thing.
Andrew and then
But
me
you
and
can-
then Jamie.
Well, I have one comment, but.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's
Andrew
fine with
and then
me.
Andrew.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah, I'm really sorry because I missed the initial kind of presentation. I just go back to something that I've said at, past meetings. And I'm very fortunate in many ways. I have a car, so I'm fortunate because I can afford it. But we park on the street because I don't have enough to park, $900 a month in a garage. And my wife works in the Bronx, so she drives back. Driving in circles, sometimes you get a spot, other times it's a pain. I look at everything that's going on in this city right now, it just seems to me there are so many crushing issues. And the one thing that essentially comes up in every single category, here among people that make a lot of money, is everything is so damn expensive in New York. And I just feel like this is another thing where for people who live in the neighborhood that want to come in to see a show, that want to come in to see their grandkids, that are health aid, it's just another thing that nickels and dimes people, makes it even more expensive and more of a pain and more inconvenient in many different ways, and feeds this larger narrative that the city is more and more unlivable for people. And I don't know, there's just something that kind of always irks me, like even saying like, oh, this is going to pay for this. It's like, well, if we collected the money and people paid their fares, you wouldn't need to have congestion pricing. I look at everything, when Bloomberg was in office, I think the annual budget was like $70 billion. Now it's going to be $110 billion. You go through agency by agency, service by service, and the quality of what we get and what's delivered. It's just questionable. I just think we can keep charging for everything. I just don't see that we get that much benefit for a lot of things. And it just feeds this narrative of like, it's more expensive here, it's more expensive there. And
thanks. Andrew.
One of the big benefits that New York area has is its mass transit system. You can easily live here without a car.
I was on a train, 3 crazy people today. A guy almost kicked a kid and the nanny in the head and started cursing. So like, it is a constant thing. It's not the train's fault. But what I'm saying, and sorry, I don't want to, I just constantly feel every way that there's all these narratives and everything.
I'm gonna get to that in my MTA update.
No, I know, and I know it's a lot more complicated, so I don't want to
But I was gonna
Let's go back to
say,
Andrew. Yeah.
you can live here without a car. Our service runs 24/7. Some people need cars and we should be respectful of that. I always thought that the first place that would have residential parking permits was Jamaica Estates, because so many people drive to the end of the F line at 179th Street and Hillside Avenue to avoid the fees on the Long Island Railroad and get an empty express train into Manhattan from there.
Yeah.
They haven't done it. I understand it's been pretty successful in Boston. And I would not be averse to having a trial of residential parking permits in the city. I know other neighborhoods have mentioned it. I hope we will get congestion pricing. I think that will change a lot of habits, actually. And I would echo what Sam Schwartz said and did echo it several years ago. If you think you're going to park in the Upper East or Upper West Side and save the congestion fee, once you see how few parking spaces there are, how expensive garages are, and how overcrowded the trains and buses already are, you won't try it a second time.
I agree with that. So I'm gonna jump in with just a couple of thoughts that haven't actually already been said, for once in my life. My concern with the proposal that we heard tonight maybe takes a little bit of a page from Andrew Rigie's point. Not so much the nickel and diming part, but the city only for the rich part. Because I'm concerned that if we don't have a focus on the neighborhood, the folks who live here and the folks who own businesses here, and to a certain extent, the folks who come in to patronize those businesses too, let's be real. And I'm thinking about Chinatown as much as I'm thinking about up here now with that comment. But anyway, even though we live in an incredibly affluent area, not everybody shares that affluence. Some of us just happen to have a cheap apartment and we stay there. But there are plenty of folks in neighborhoods, pick a suburb, any suburb, that can outbid me for the resident, I'm sorry, not the residents, but what Dr. was proposing. So I'm concerned that all we're benefit this, thank you. I'm concerned that if we go down that road, we're gonna price ourselves out of the market and then our parking gets offloaded to people from Scarsdale and Greenwich and wherever. So and the other thing is that I've only been a member of this committee for a couple of years, but I've been sitting around this table for quite a while. And every time you talk about changing parking regulations, there's always somebody who has a 1964 Chevrolet Impala and he uses it to deliver hot home cooked meals to recent refugees or, and I can't devise in my head a system that penalizes or charges me, but still lets that person have the parking that he or she needs in order to do God's work. So I want to learn a whole lot more before we go down the road of supporting any one proposal. I have a funny feeling we're going to end up supporting more than one proposal. At least I'd like at least that to be part of the conversation. And I think that I know that I ordered the book, but I haven't read yet. And there's things that I need to learn. So that's what I'm going to add to this conversation tonight, other than to reiterate what we've already done, which is to thank Jami for taking this on with both hands and with her own initiative, and amazingly got one of the foremost authorities on one version of how to solve these problems to zoom in from California in between talking to students to us. I'd like to think of us as his students too now. And anyway, so thank you very much for that. And the last word goes to you.
Beverly, I think, has a question.
No.
No, I thought you were about to say something.
Well, I was, but it wasn't a question.
Well, you should make a comment if you want.
I mean, what you said, Mark, really did strike me, but it also struck me that one of the benefits a parking benefit district could offer is that people who needed cars who made under this amount a year would be able to actually be reimbursed their fees. So I just think there are lots of ways to start thinking about this that are, that don't quite have the sort of oppositional nature of, our values as a district and the fact that this is an economically based system.
Well, yeah, and that actually brings up another point, which is we're all talking about cars that have out-of-state license plates on them as if they're not our neighbors.
Right.
Or not, or they probably are customers, or probably are our neighbors. So the ones that are there all week.
I see.
They're probably just registered. in the
Right.
neighborhood as the insurance is cheap.
Right.
California plate on.
Yeah, no, but yes, very, it's our businesses depend to a large extent to people coming in and spending money.
I mean,
And
obviously,
they're not-
or they take mass transit to get here, but if they can't.
And they do.
Yeah.
But they should have that option. Yeah, okay, so last word to Jamie, and then we're gonna move on to MTA updates and then say goodnight.
Well, I invited Dr. Shoup not because I fully ascribe to or am committed to part of the benefit district. I invited him to be in an information gathering phase of trying to think about, not even do, think about perhaps reforming our parking and our curbs. And so I'm even newer to the committee than you. I've only been here a couple of months. But I've lived here all my life. I actually grew up in New York in one of those rare families where my parents drove everywhere. Lower East Side, we're going to the Upper West Side, we're gonna drive. Why are we doing that? I don't know, just get in the car. So I've always had a car, but I love the subway. I love all forms of transportation, and I think we have to find ways to get along and go along as neighbors in our district. And I'm deeply curious about how we can do that moving forward. And I'm not convinced, I'm with Andrew, I'm not convinced congestion pricing is going to mean more congestion parking in our district, but it got me thinking. And why not think together about the issues that affect our community and our neighbors? So that's why I thought we'd start with Dr. Shoup and move beyond Dr. Shoup, or maybe move back to what he's proposing. We'll see together.
Thank you, that's
Thank you.
perfect. Yeah. So with that, we're gonna close this item off of our agenda. You have some updates for us?
I do indeed.
Excellent.
So as everybody has heard, the judge in the New Jersey governor's case against congestion pricing is likely to make a decision within the next 2 to 3 weeks. He's mindful of the approximate mid-June startup date of congestion pricing, and he wants to render a decision in case he's thinks that they've done enough environmental review, which is what the basics of what New Jersey is questioning, that it could start on time. So stay tuned for that. Governor Murphy has said if he loses this, he will appeal. I don't believe that will stop the start of it, but the appeal will be heard. So hopeful for a positive adjudication on this, because pretty much all of the MTA's capital program is on hold right now. We were going to hear tonight, but it's delayed till next month, about making the 81st and 96th Street B/C line stations accessible. That contract is not definite yet, but those are the 2 stations on that line that can be made accessible due to the ultra wide sidewalk at 81st and 97th Street end of 96th Street station. The other stations just don't have room with the Central Park West buildings and smaller side streets. So those are the 2 stations that are scheduled to be done on that. And they are doing about 25 to 30 stations a year now, prior to this hold on the capital program, which is more than they've ever done before, which is great. You have also probably heard that some new categories have been allowed to get exemptions, such as commuter buses like Hampton Jitney and Megabus, which, because they are mass transit and do have regular scheduled routes, so they will be exempt. Yellow school buses will be exempt, and city vehicles that are working in the business district will be exempt. There has been another crackdown on fare evasion. It's called Operation Fair Play. That's FARE. And if there are 800 new officers that are watching that, and that is really important, because that will also stop a lot of the crimes that are happening in the system, since most of the folks that are doing those crimes didn't pay their fare. So we hope that this is important. People frequently confuse congestion pricing with fares. That's the operating budget, and congestion pricing is the capital budget. So it's not one or the other. We need both, obviously. But now, Andrew mentioned seeing some disturbed people today. There is a new program called the Scout program that combines clinicians with 2 MTA police officers. They are stopping people that they see who appear to be homeless. They're having conversations with these folks. They're determining who needs help and who's just happens to be homeless, which is not a crime, but it's not really healthy to live in the system with, 24 hours a day of rail dust in your lungs. You don't want that. But the folks that need mental assistance are being taken to centers. And unlike the Bowery Residence Committee, who rounds people up in the midnight hours if they were planning to sleep on the trains and takes them to service, these folks actually follow up. They find out how long they're staying in service, what kind of service they receive, and where they go next. So in the first 90 days of the Scout program, they have actually helped 90 individuals, which was really great, a person a day. So they are continuing this program. Hopefully they will get more of the folks who need help to that help that they need. That's the Scout program. Bus operators are going to be given partitions so that they are not targets of anybody. This requires these new electronic mirrors to be placed on the outside of buses, and that requires state approval. So we're awaiting the state approval, and then you will see partitions for bus operators. There are also going to be, if you haven't seen them yet, bus CCTV screens in buses to record who's in the buses, which will also help people know, like that horrific event that just happened on the BX22 in the process. You will be on camera and your face will be recorded like they are in the subways. So that was a horrific event. In the back of the head, fortunately, that person will survive. These are all making terrible headlines, I have to say. Now, CBTC is part of the capital program. While that is on hold, and I'll give an example. Queens Boulevard East, Queens Boulevard West, and the Culver line, all part of the F line, have been done, but 6th Avenue part has not been done. So you won't get the benefits of the entire CBTC communications-based train control, which means more frequent trains safely closer together. But what I also learned was, and I just learned this at the last meeting, while they're doing this work, they're also renovating or replacing interlockings. They've done that out in Briarwood, on the eastern end of Queens Boulevard East. They're doing it on 6th Avenue. They're doing it on near Avenue X in Brooklyn. Replacing interlockings is a much better system than what we had. These are really old, some of these interlockings, and this will allow much safer, faster train service. So that's a good part of the thing. And I'm sure everybody has heard that after 8 months of work, it's been that long, unbelievably, but the F and the M line under 63rd Street, Roosevelt Island, is back in service. There was a mountain of work they had to do. People on Roosevelt Island were relegated to the tram or a shuttle bus or a shuttle train just from Queensbridge to 63rd and Lex. So that service is back, and it is running really well, I have to say. You may have heard about the massive toll evasion. Well, the MTA recently got 66 vehicles seized that owed over $700,000 in unpaid tolls. Can you imagine how much money that would have contributed to mass transit, the safety of our bridges and tunnels? It's unreal. One vehicle alone owed over $200,000. They're determined that if they now find people are this kind of in debt and have this many violations, they will be banned from MTA bridges and tunnels. Yeah. So, and also in this case, their vehicle will be seized if they're caught there again. So this is just unbelievable, this kind of money. And
there must be some criminal penalty for that. Are they pursuing that?
Theft of service. There's not. They're pursuing action against these individuals, these vehicles. Absolutely.
Because when people jump the turnstile for 290, they get a
yes.
There's some kind of criminal. This is $200,000.
It's unbelievable.
Jumping a turnstile is not a criminal offense anymore.
Well, $200,000 is evidently easy as well.
And the last thing I want to add is, if you don't already know, at the end of this month, the uptown side of 86th Street and Broadway on the one line will be closed for about 5 to 6 weeks, like other stations have been. 79th, 50th Street downtown is closed now for structural renovation. After they do that, they will convert to the downtown side, so that will also be closed. But they're doing this work and they're finding some faults. They did it at 79th Street, and this is very important work. They're also redoing the ADA platform areas. They're making it much easier to distinguish where the doors will be for people with wheelchairs and that sort of thing. So they're getting ready for when some of those streets are obviously 79th and 86th are not accessible. 96th Street is accessible. 50th Street is not accessible. So we have a long way to go and make stations accessible, and we really need congestion pricing to help do it. And I will end there.
That's great, thanks.
Tell it to the judge.
Yeah.
Is there a sense of how it's going to go?
There are several lawsuits, so.
Right, the main one in New Jersey.
The main one in New
is the one
Jersey,
the
and there's one
environmental-
from Staten Island and the United Federation of Teachers. There's one from residents of the Lower East Side, which I'm sure you've heard about.
Oh, a little bit.
Yeah, it will make life a lot better for drivers and users of transit. Drivers will have a clearer way. They will get to their destination more quickly, more safely, and mass transit users will have a major upgrade to so many parts of the system. This is a no-brainer, and I really hope that we get the answer we need.
And considering that we're making it longer and farther away to get to our hospitals, having the ambulances be able to actually get there might not be a bad
Hospitals
thing.
may be closing that.
But don't
should
get me started on
definitely
that Israel.
not-
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to close my eyes and see if there's any hands raised, and seeing none, I'm going to say thank you, everybody, for both online and with us here in the room for a good meeting and the first of many on a very important topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting.